And he feels every inch of that. Just because you didn't give up on God doesn't mean you didn't feel the loss. Doesn't mean that you can sleep at night. Doesn't mean you got all your energy and passion back at work, right? Doesn't mean there aren't more hard questions coming along down the pike. Like, today, what do you do to get through after? What do you do? And how do you help someone else? There's a lot to be learned from what happens next. Job has 3 friends who hear about what happened to him. News travels fast, even then. And so it's written that they come to see him. And that when they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. He's in such bad shape. He's got this awful skin wasting disease thing happening, head to toe. He's in pain constantly, 24/7. It says they began to weep aloud when they saw him from a distance, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. He was so bad he was unrecognizable to them. And then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights, and no one said a word to him, because they saw how great his suffering was. You ever had something like that? Friend, family? It was just so bad, you just feel stupid even trying to say a thing. So you just be quiet. And you're just there. That's all you can do, is just be quiet. Well, this goes on for 7 days and 7 nights, and just nobody saying nothing. And then it's written that after this, around day 8, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. He says this, "May the day of my birth perish. And the night it was said, a boy is born, that day may it turn to darkness. May God above not care about it. May no light shine on it. May darkness and deep shadow claim it once more." He's saying, I wish I'd never existed. This is so bad. Not that God isn't in his right to take away what he gave to me in the first place, but if it feels like this to lose, then I just wish I'd never have been in the first place. He goes on for paragraphs and paragraphs. He says, "Why is light given to those in misery, and life to the bitter of soul, to those who long for death that doesn't come, who search for death and more than for hidden treasure, who are filled with gladness and rejoice when they reach the grave?" What is the point of life if it can have this much pain in it? That's what he's saying. This is dark stuff. You picking up what I'm laying down? This is dark. There's a reason people don't read this book. This is the reason. And this, he goes on for chapters of this. And he's eloquent about it too. He's articulate, but it's just so dark. And you might think, well, wait, what's wrong with this guy? I thought this was a really good guy. Well, it's called grief. It's called grief. It's a man exposing his emotion about what it feels like to lose what he's lost. It's the pain of it. He's just expressing it out loud. He's just saying, this is terrible. And this is how terrible it is. This is what it feels like. This is what it makes me think. This is what I wrestle with. This is what it's like right now. And nothing is making it better. Now he goes on and on like this. And his friends are about to expose the number one mistake that we make. with people who are in grief, including ourselves, by the way. You got somebody who is sitting in silence in grief, and then they're speaking out, and they're just saying everything that's in there. And when Job starts grieving out loud and expressing everything he's in there, his friends start to get a little uncomfortable with what's being said. And one friend, Eliphaz, his name is, he says, Job, think how you have instructed many, how you have strengthened feeble hands. Your words have supported those who stumbled. You've strengthened faltering knees. You've been such a help to people before. I mean, come on. But now trouble comes to you, and you are discouraged. It strikes you, and you are dismayed. Should not your piety be your confidence, and your blameless ways your hope? Come on, man, shape up, focus. Come on, it's been 7 days. God won't let bad things happen to good people for very long. Come on, snap out of it. Been such a good guy, been so helpful. Come on, you have to know it's going to turn around if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Right, man? Terrible things don't happen to good people. Terrible things have happened to you. Do the math. And let's get this thing fixed. Let's work on your character. Maybe there's a way through this. That is just so helpful. Thank you, Eliphaz. Thank you so kindly. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? I mean, do you ever have somebody, you go through something terrible and somebody comes up to you and isn't it about long enough that you've been feeling this grief over this thing? Come on, come on. Come on. I remember one time I had this ridiculous surgery. It was just terrible, like 12-hour surgery or something like that. And they cut me they cut me from here down. And it was just like that. I'm telling you what, an abdominal cut from here down, like the recovery from that back when I did it was not a joke. And I remember going home and I was all stapled. I mean, staple. Yeah, you're like, ugh, gross, but that's what it was. And I lived like that, but the first thing, I went home and they put me on narcotics, which is actually a really bad idea for me. I'm gonna be upfront. Okay, it makes me out of my mind and I can't stand it. And so anyway, I've taken it and it made me a little sick to my stomach. And so I'm recovering from all that, and I can barely kind of to stand up is a big deal. And so I'm home and I'm sick, and I get sick enough, I'm like, oh boy, this is a disaster. Because what went down is coming back up. And I got no idea what's going to happen. And I'm like kneeling down on the floor. I'm like, I'm gonna throw up. This is bad. It finally happens. I'm telling you, the pain that you go through when you throw up after you've been cut open all the way, it's just like, I almost passed out, but thankfully I didn't. And in the middle of that, somehow I'm kind of like stumbling out of the bathroom, and someone came up to me and they go, "Are you still feeling sick?" It's been like 2 weeks. Should be in better shape by now. And I thought, that is helpful. Because here I was feeling like this unnecessarily all this time. I didn't have to go through all that. Thanks, man. That's awesome. Thank you. You should get a Nobel Prize. Just relieved my suffering. Sometimes people are like that. They're not thinking, like, oh, hasn't it been like a year since all those people got hurt and your whole thing blew up? You don't like, oh, thank you for reminding me. It's been a whole 12 months since, my wife left me or something happened to somebody I love. Thank you for reminding me. Gosh. What are friends for but that? This is Job's reply. He says, "Do you mean to correct what I say and treat the words of a despairing man as wind? He says, is there any wickedness on my lips? Can my mouth not discern malice? What's that mean? He's saying, am I saying like evil things here that you need to correct me? You think I can't tell when I'm going to say something hateful about God before I say it? I haven't said anything hateful about God. I'm just saying this is terrible. He feels like it's ridiculous for his friends to try and get him to stop. Maybe you know what that's like. You know, to be shh about the pain. You know, like we don't need all that. You know, you're making people uncomfortable with all of your pain talk. It's a little dark for the children. Come on. One of the worst, least helpful things we do is try and divert people's attention away from what's real. It's terrible. You should focus on something else. Should they? Ask yourself that. Be real about that. Is that what's right? You should focus on something completely different. If something terrible has happened, should you just kind of glaze past that and find something else to put your focus on? Is that what's really good? That's a legit question. And if you read his words and really take this all in, you might actually see that there's a risk in trying to get people to just forget about pain. You know, try and cover it up somehow, find a distraction, get a new high, something. Because as he goes on, and you've got to read this thing for yourselves, guys and girls. You're like, how much of it? I think you should read the whole thing. You know what? Just give us a few verses. No, I think you should read the whole book of Job. Outlandish, I know. Just outlandish. I think you should read the whole thing. You're like, I don't have time to read. I don't know. Your smartphone says otherwise. Just saying. Okay? He goes and goes and goes. And there's something crazy that happens. And it actually confused me at first when I was reading, because it seems like he's responding to his friends. He's really annoyed with his friends. Really annoyed with his friends. And he's going on and on and on. You know, what are you guys talking about? But something starts to happen. The language that he's using, the phrasing, and all of a sudden you wonder, wait, is he talking to his friends? Or is he talking to God? Yeah. Listen to this. He starts talking about his friends, to his friends, but then he says this, right in the middle of all this, he says, what is man that you make so much of him? That you give him so much attention and test him every moment? Will you never look away from me or let me alone for an instant? If I have sinned, what have I done to you, O watcher of men? Why have you made me your target? Have I become a burden to you? Why do you not pardon my offenses and forgive my sins? He's complaining to God. That's what he's doing. He's complaining to God. When people are going through real grief, and the grief is actually allowed to happen, real grief leads to real relationship. It does. If you don't suppress it, if you don't pretend it doesn't exist, that all the things that happened to you never happened, all the things that should have been done that didn't, you just pretend that was all, just Candyland and wonder. If you don't do that, and if you actually let the pain feel what it is, and look it in the face, and just process that out loud, and just describe how bad it really is, call the kettle black, call what people did to you for what it really was. If you go down that rabbit hole and let it go long enough, I'm telling you, friends, this is where you actually arrive. Not talking about complaining about God to other people. I'm talking about taking your complaints to God. Instead of just looking for something to put over it, cover it up, a new high, something lucrative to take our mind as far away from all that as possible. Job doesn't do any of that stuff. Maybe it's because he can't, okay? I don't know what his options really are. But he's got the time to sit and reflect, and he just lets it all out and lets it all out and lets it all out. And the next thing you know, he's not even aware of his friends anymore. He's having a legitimate conversation with his Maker. And he is unafraid to say what's real. And you can not do that. I mean, most of us by default won't do that. You know, what most of us will do is we'll have our complaints, but we find a way to complain about our lives to people who really can't do much of anything. I can't believe what so-and-so did to me. Oh, okay, you tell your neighbor, I can't believe what my other neighbor did. Can you believe that? And then you go back the other side of the fence, can you believe what he did? I mean, that's ridiculous. We're wired like that, right? Very often, God is the very last place we would ever think to take our complaints. Why is that? I don't know. Part of us, maybe some of us grew up in a religious background, and it just seems kind of improper to go to the Maker of the universe with issues, right? Like, well, I really don't like how this went, and I don't know what to make of it. This seems kind of inappropriate. You should take your hat off when you come in the church, and you don't say things like that to God, right? I don't think God came up with that. I think we came up with that. Because, let me tell you, there is legitimately no place in the Bible. Get this. Mike, you correct me in public if you need to. I can't think of one place in the Bible where a person took their complaints directly to God and God said, that's it, boom, you're done. Nowhere. Not one place. Now, God has smited some people for some other reasons. Terrible things, blasphemies they've said about Him to other people, trying to steer other people away from Him. He's ended those careers pretty quick at different times. But never one time is there an example like I just spoke of. What if you actually trusted God enough to go to Him and complain? That sounds like a crazy question. What if you trusted God enough to go and complain? It feels wrong, right? It feels wrong. Actually, what you're going to see is it's not wrong. and you might say, well, I've already read the book of Job. And here's what happens. Job complains and complains, and his friends try and, steer him away from his complaints, and they try and tell him they try and solve his problems. Well, you didn't see this, Job, and maybe you screwed up this way, and did you think about that, and maybe you did this other sin that you never thought of, and blah, 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 blah. And Job says, you guys are ridiculous. I didn't do any of the things you're accusing me of. It's just really bad, and I really don't like it. And what's crazy is that in the end, God shows up. And what's amazing is that God takes, first he by the way, he does deal with those friends. Okay, there's some dealing. There's some dealing. You have to read about it. But God does not punish Job for his complaints. He deals with his complaints. He works him over about the things that he feels and the things that he's been thinking. And he walks him through it. And he asks him questions that he can't answer. He finishes the process with him. And in the end, I don't want to, I can't spoil it. That's spoiler alert. Can't do that. Job doesn't get punished. It gets better. It gets better. just going to ask you today, what would it be like? What would your life be like if you actually took your sufferings, your pains, and made it practice to go first to God and say, this is terrible. Just say it out loud. This is as bad as it feels. I don't even know if it's right to feel it, but this is what it is to me. That's what grief is. You know, you might be fighting with that idea. Well, this is really not the appropriate way to have a relationship with God. You know what? At least you'll have one. At least you'll have one, friends. Instead of whatever piece of plastic Christian ID card you're carrying around with you in your wallet, when you pretend. That's what you get when you pretend. You don't get anywhere when you pretend to have a relationship with somebody. Well, it's not as bad as Actually, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Did you tell him about it? He's looking for you. He's looking for you. Therefore, I will not keep silent. I will speak out in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. This is a man who knew it was better to have a relationship with God that is raw and real, because you can trust Him that He will sort you out. He is not afraid of your pain. He is not afraid of a few expletives that you eke out on accident. You know, he's not afraid of your language and you're not churchy enough sounding. Do you think God is afraid of all of that? Do you think God doesn't know that you already think it? You think He doesn't know that you feel it, you're trying not to think it, and you thunk it anyway, and you're feeling... You think He doesn't know all that? He does. He wants honesty. How are you going to have a relationship without some honesty? If you are somebody who has had terrible things happen, don't compare your stuff. Was it terrible to you? To you. That'll do. One of the worst things that you could do is just pretend it's not as bad. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. And look for ways to cover it over. Look for something lucrative to draw your attention away from it. Look for some kind of bridge to get from here to there without ever having to deal with all of that stuff. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole. Maybe for you it feels like finding a loose thread in a shirt when you're out in public. You know, you got a nice shirt on and you see that loose thread and you're like, I'm tempted to tug at it. But I'm a little bit afraid if I do, by the time I'm down at the bottom, I won't have a shirt on anymore. That's what it can feel like. I call it the Band-Aid theory. You know, we convince ourselves that 10 years of pain at level 4 is better than like 2 minutes of pain at level 10. And it's not. Some of you are just waiting to rip the Band-Aid off. And go to your Savior and say, you know what? I feel guilty that I even feel this way. I feel wrong. I'm confused why I feel this way. Just forget all that and just let it out. It hurt. It hurt terrible. And it's killing me. And I don't know what to do. Somebody here needs to do that. We'll have people up here today that will walk through that with you if you want. You have these prayer team folks up here. Come on up, guys, anytime. I'm going to pray for you now because that's all I can do. I can't do that part for you. All I can do is give you my word that if you begin the process of exposing your emotions to your Lord, you will begin a journey that actually takes you to healing. It actually takes you to a higher place than where you've experienced. I'm not promising all of the things that hurt will suddenly magically come back. I'm not promising that. I can't. It's not mine. But I am telling you that a journey of actual healing can begin when you get honest with your Lord. So I invite you to do that today. I invite you to do that tomorrow. I invite you to do that Wednesday. Not just today, but to make that your habit. If you have a complaint, don't forget that it exists. Take it to your Maker in heaven. And let Him be the first at all times. He'll sort you out. He'll sort you out. He's not afraid of you. He's big. Father, you gave us this story for a reason. We believe there's healing power in this story. There's wisdom to be gained, but there's also something we need to learn about our emotion. God, will you hear us? Listen to us. Whether we're wrong or we're right, can we trust you, God? It's a step of faith to say yes. So here goes. Yes, I hated that. Yes, that almost killed me inside. Yes, the shock of that was too much. I couldn't process it for years. Yes, I need help. Yes, this is what it is. God, help us to have the bravery to come. Help us to have the discipline. Build it into our lives when we feel it awful. Take it to you first. God, we want to trust you. I pray for that person who's got a healing journey to begin today. Whether they're partway or just starting. That you would convince them that you actually are good for it. That what has been allowed to take place in this world can be overcome by your supernatural plans and power. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. I'm done for today, but maybe you're not. So come on up for prayer. These guys and gals would desperately like to pray for you. Just if you want to share anything with them that you need help with praying for. If you're low on faith about anything I said here today, but you've got just a little spark, they would love to help you and take that and run that ball with you. I'm going to see you, I'll see you next week, hopefully at a group. I hope you see each other at a group. If you want to know more about that, take a look at the app.